Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. All right, everybody. I am back. Good to be back. So here's the bottom line. We don't normally record on Friday, but I just felt like here's the truth is that it's portal season. The portal open on Monday. This is the first big weekend of portal visits across college football. So I figured I'd just spend 4, 5, 6 minutes, whatever it ends up being. It's going to be more than 4 or 5. If you know me, I like to talk. Talking about the first big visit weekend in college football. What you need to know, who's going to be where, who could come off the board, the big trends because the portal is open. And like I said, this is the first big visit weekend, and I expect several big names to come off the board. Speaking of which, if you are not following our social media accounts that cover college football portal coverage specifically, CFB Transfers. It's that simple. CFB Transfers on Twitter, but CFB Transfers on Instagram as well. All of your late breaking news ends up on both of those pages, visits, commitments, all of that good stuff. Make sure you're following CFB Transfers on Twitter, but also on Instagram as well. Let's go ahead and dive into some of the big names that are visiting this weekend. And listen, I think the place we got to start is the place that we always got to start when it comes to portal recruiting. That is Colorado. Now, Colorado is expected to actually, believe it or not, have a little bit of a quieter weekend this weekend. I think next weekend is the weekend that they're really ramping up for a lot of portal visits. My guess, and I haven't heard anybody publicly say it, it's that Coach Prime's got to be in New York for Travis Hunter, his future Heisman Trophy winner. At least that's what I think. I don't want to jinx it. But the fact remains that even in what is deemed to be not the biggest weekend of Colorado visits, it doesn't mean that there won't be some big names on campus. We've talked about some of these earlier in the week. Let's revisit. By the way, I know I just mentioned the CFB portal page, but if you are a Colorado fan, make sure you're following Torres on CU on Twitter for all of your late breaking Colorado news. And boy, oh boy, is there going to be plenty over the next couple weeks. First name that you need to know, Jaheim Oatis. So we talked about him earlier in the week. He is a guy that many believe to be the best defensive lineman in the portal, has played the last 3 years at Alabama, was a fringe 5-star, probably a high 4-star, low 5-star recruit in the class of 2022, goes to Alabama, in 2022, and has a monster year. All SEC freshman team in 2022, 29 tackles and a sack that season. Last year was limited by injuries. This year, of course, the coaching staff comes in, new coaching staff, things change up a little bit. He ends up taking a red shirt, but it does change the fact that he is a special talent and a special player, okay? Monstrous kind of nose tackle, big guy, run stuffer, etc. He is expected to be on campus. And listen, the rumors are, like, I don't think it's crazy to think that they could potentially be on commitment watch with Jaheim Oatis. He's obviously not necessarily been in the portal, but known he's going to transfer for a while. And I think if he sees what he's looking for at Colorado with Damian Lewis as the defensive line coach, Warren Sapp, obviously working with the D-line, it wouldn't stun me to see him commit this weekend. So Jaheim Oatis is the first big name. Would not stun me to see him commit to Colorado. Speaking of Colorado, it is worth noting they have another big-time visitor, and it shows you just how good the recruiting is going when this isn't even supposed to be the big recruiting weekend, and they get several big names on campus. The next one is Caleb Odom, 6'5", 227-pound, former 5-star receiver, played this year at Alabama, didn't have a ton of production. Doesn't change the fact that he is a very talented player, okay? Again, 6'5", big body. The note here, and this is important, is from Carrollton, Georgia, played high school football with Julian Lewis. Of course, Julian Lewis was the 5-star wide receiver that committed to Colorado just a few weeks ago. So we think there's a pretty good chance that Caleb Odom could end up a Buff. Now, it's also worth noting, Caleb Odom has set up other visits. He is expected to visit Ole Miss. He is expected to visit Miami. So the bottom line is this is one that maybe isn't necessarily on commitment watch. But again, you get kids around Coach Prime. You give them the opportunity to be around that program. Sometimes kids don't want to take any other visits. So I just bring it up to say Caleb Odom is on commitment watch. He is on a visit this weekend. The plan is not to commit. The plan is to take other visits. But stranger things have happened with Coach Prime than getting a 5-star to commit while on campus. Really quickly, a couple other names to know. Fresno State defensive tackle Gabriel Lightfoot. Great name for a defensive tackle, by the way. Gabriel Lightfoot is going to expected to be on campus as well this weekend. One thing I should note, by the way, this stuff changes so quick. So if stuff changes, don't get mad at Torres. I'm just here reporting facts as they are in real time around 4 o'clock Eastern time. Stuff changes, whatever. But Gabriel Lightfoot is expected to be on campus, 37 tackles, 1.5 TFLs this year at Fresno State. Monster in the middle. We'll see if Coach Prime can close. Last Colorado recruiting note, there's obviously other players that are going to visit, but the big name to know for next week, it is still expected that Caden Salter is going to be visiting Colorado during this portal cycle and early next week. We've talked about him a million times. You don't need me to retell you everything there is to know about him, but played at Liberty, led them to 13 wins a year ago. Last season finished with 2,800 yards passing, 32 touchdowns. Now this year had some injuries, took a little bit of a step back. Completion percentage was down, 15 TDs. Also worth noting, by the way, rushed for over 1,000 yards as a quarterback. So he is a true dual threat guy. We will see if Colorado can get this kid to commit. I think it's worth noting, right, is a few things with the Colorado quarterback room. One, as I just mentioned, we know Julian Lewis is coming in next year. But two, Shedeur Sanders' two primary backups this year, Destin Wade and Walter Taylor Jr., both have entered the portal. So I think they seem to think that Julian Lewis has the upper hand, but obviously you want a veteran presence alongside him. Would not stun me, I said earlier in the week, if we had kind of what happened at Florida this year, where you have the veteran player that then kind of shares reps with the younger player, so the younger player isn't thrown into the fire as a true freshman. But the fact that Colorado is looking at veteran quarterbacks to me is very interesting. We'll see if Colorado can close on Caden Salter. Again, that would not be until next week. And again, a quick reminder, make sure you are following our Torres on CU page for all sorts of late-breaking Colorado news, and there is going to be plenty over the next couple weeks. Let's get to some other news and notes. First of all, Penn State preparing for a college football playoff appearance. We know that, Penn State is just not a program that is going to have a lot of, needs in the portal. They're not trying to flip 80% of their roster or whatever. It's not like Indiana from a year ago. But I bring it up because they are hosting a literal and proverbial big visitor this weekend, Bear Alexander. If you follow college football at all, you know everything there is to know about Bear Alexander. Former 5-star, played on Georgia's second national championship team 3 seasons ago. That season had 3 TFLs, 2 sacks as a true freshman, played in that national championship game against TCU, enters the portal in the spring, ends up at USC. Kind of an up and down 2 years at USC, like Jaheim Otis, took a red shirt midway through this year to not burn a year of eligibility. And so he's been kind of weighing his options for a while. We've seen schools like Colorado, but also Texas, SMU involved, but Penn State does get the first visit. We'll see if James Franklin can close. Obviously, those kind of body types, you just don't have a lot of them. So Penn State trying to take advantage of this window where they are now in the playoff. They have been great for years, but couldn't get over the hump. They are officially in the playoff, and Bear Alexander is one of several expected visitors this weekend. Let's go ahead and go to Alabama. And what I will say about Alabama, besides the fact that we do have a Bama page as well, Torres on Bama, make sure you're following that page. What I'll say about Bama, Bama has one thing we could say about them is they have a very interesting player on campus as I am speaking. So Kevin Concepcion, KC Concepcion, we've talked about him a lot. This was the ACC Rookie of the Year 2 years ago, freshman All-American, wide receiver at NC State. Now, the numbers dipped a little bit this year. 53 receptions, 460 yards, 6 touchdowns. That shows you how good he was because the numbers are actually down from a season ago in which he had 10 touchdowns receiving 839 yards, as well as 329 yards rushing as well. So one of the most versatile players in all of college football. Earlier this week, he announced a final 6 of Texas A&M, Colorado, Alabama, Miami, South Carolina, and Florida State. Bring it up. He was supposed to visit A&M. As of right now, the visit is off. But what's interesting is that he is on campus at Alabama right now. You follow Instagram, you follow the stories. He checked in. He did a little pin from Tuscaloosa. So listen, obviously, look, I know things didn't go quite as planned at Alabama this year, but I think the one thing that is obvious is they need more, dynamic players, in my opinion, behind Ryan Williams in that offense. I just don't think they had enough dynamicism. Is that the right word? I always trip over that word. Outside of Ryan Williams, obviously Jalen Milroe at the quarterback position, but I mean at the wide receiver, running back position, they just didn't have dudes that could make plays. Their offense, when you could slow down Jalen Milroe, it became very easy to defend. So Kevin Concepcion is at Alabama right now. Like I said, South Carolina, Miami, Colorado, A&M, and Florida State are believed to be in the mix as well. We'll see if Alabama can keep him on campus and get that commitment, because these are the types of players that Kalen DeBoer needs to bring in to highlight what has the chance to be an explosive offense, but you need some more explosive playmakers. Speaking of playmakers, Luke Haas from Arkansas, a tight end, also is on campus this weekend, or is projected and expected to be on campus. A tight end, 26 catches this year, 314 yards, 4 touchdowns. And those numbers are actually a little bit skewed from a season ago when this kid had even, basically equivalent numbers this year. So I'm not here to blame Arkansas. There's enough negativity around Arkansas football right now. I'm not going to blame Bobby Petrino or Taylon Green, whatever. But I think this kid felt like he could have a bigger role. This was a kid that Alabama actually recruited out of high school. He ends up going to Arkansas, which is a little bit closer to home when he was in Oklahoma. He's from Oklahoma originally. And so I'll be curious to see if Alabama can go ahead and get him done as well. Obviously, the big name at tight end for Alabama, C.J. Dupree, is graduating after this year. He was kind of one of those veteran leaders that took on a bigger leadership role after Nick Saban retired. C.J. Dupree is gone. So Luke Haas, will see if he commits to Arkansas. Auburn. I'll say this. Auburn is a very interesting team right now in the portal, okay? So keep in mind with Auburn, we know basically Auburn, you can encapsulate their season in a nutshell into one simple thing. Too often, their quarterbacks turn the ball over. I thought it was interesting. The all-SEC freshman team came out on Thursday. I think Auburn had like 5 or 6 guys on that team. Jay Crawford, Cam Coleman, DeMarcus Riddick. That freshman class that Hugh Freeze signed 2 cycles ago, so the 2024 cycle, they largely did what they were expected to do. The class that's coming in this year is phenomenal, headlined by Deuce Knight. But Deuce Knight just isn't a quarterback that is going to be able to step in day one and be a star in the SEC. And so it appears as though Hugh Freeze is looking for a bridge quarterback to get to Deuce Knight 18 months from now, or 12 months from now, really. Be ready, probably again, what we just talked about with Colorado with Julian Lewis. Do they bring in a veteran alongside him? By the way, Michigan, they are crystal ball to get Billy Edwards, who of course was at Maryland this year, a veteran as well. Bring it up because at Auburn, they are very seriously pursuing quarterbacks, okay? So first of all, Malik Murphy, we believe, was on campus earlier this week. Malik Murphy was the interesting story, played at Texas for 2 years, was Quinn Ewers' backup last year, actually had to play some meaningful snaps, but this year when Quinn Ewers comes back, Arch Manning is clearly the backup, and so Malik Murphy decides to hit the portal. He goes to Duke, where he's awesome, throws for 26 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, 60% completion percentage, and decides to hit the portal again. Now, I would have thought, you're a starter at Duke, you win 9 games, you want to stay, but clearly I get the sense that Duke maybe knew that was coming because they moved so fast on Darian Mensah. It doesn't feel like that Malik Murphy hit the portal and they just decided, hey, we're going to pursue Darian Mensah. I think that there was some stuff going on behind the scenes where Duke probably knew. But I just bring it up because Malik Murphy was on campus at Auburn earlier this week, and he is going to be one of the most coveted QBs in the portal. Like I said, 26 touchdowns a year ago, 26 touchdowns this year, at Duke. And you'd think that he is going to hear quite a bit, he'll hear from quite a few schools. Again, he was on campus at Auburn earlier in the week, is expected to take some more visits down the road. What's interesting about Auburn, they had Malik Murphy on campus, but they are slowly and quietly appear to be making inroads with Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold, we know his story. You don't need me to tell you. I think he got a little bit of a raw deal at Oklahoma, was named the starter when he struggled because of the fact that, oh, by the way, the entire receiver room was basically hurt and the O-line stunk. He got benched. Then after Michael Hawkins struggled, he got brought back in. And so I just bring it up because, he hits the portal, 1,400 yards, 63% completion percentage, 12 touchdowns. I think there's a lot of meat on that bone in terms of a player that still has a ton of potential. And so he hits the portal. The early indication is that he is going to go play for Jeff Lebby, who, of course, was the former Oklahoma offensive coordinator, recruited him to Oklahoma, coached him for a year. But Auburn is slowly making headlines, and the expectation is that Jackson Arnold will be on campus this weekend at Auburn. Kind of get the vibe that they want Jackson Arnold. I think, listen, if Malik Murphy had been willing to commit on the spot, they probably would have taken that commitment. I tend to think Jackson Arnold is going to be the guy that they want. And again, it's perfect if you think about it, because Jackson Arnold's going into his third year in college football. If things go well, he's a bridge quarterback. He does it for a year. He shows just how good he is. He goes pro. And then a year from now, you hand Deuce Knight the keys to the car. Really quickly, just some other notes before we get out of here. I just mentioned the Oklahoma wide receiver room being really beat up. I think this is interesting. Nick Anderson, not the basketball player, Nick Anderson, the football player, is going to be taking 2 visits, Texas A&M as well as LSU. Nick Anderson 2 years ago, if you did not watch Oklahoma, I mean, he was a star 2 years ago. 38 catches, 798 yards, 10 touchdowns as a redshirt freshman in the 2023 season with Dylan Gabriel as his quarterback. Gets hurt, does not play this year, and decides that the portal based on the situation at Oklahoma. Well, I bring it up because even though I didn't play this year, I think everybody realizes just how good he is. Again, 38 catches, 10 touchdowns as a redshirt freshman in 2023, expected to visit Texas A&M, expected to visit LSU. By the way, shout out to my guy Ryan Brawninger at Texags, was the first one on that earlier in the week. What I find interesting about Nick Anderson visiting those 2 schools, both those schools have very clearly prioritized wide receivers in the portal. I bring it up because Texas A&M earlier this week has been crystal ball to get Micah Hudson, a player that we talked about quite a bit on the show earlier in the week. Hudson, a former 5-star wide receiver. He was the top-rated recruit to ever commit to Texas Tech. This was during the last recruiting cycle in 2024. Unfortunately, really didn't play very much. 8 catches, 123 yards. But you do think that there's plenty of potential left with him, even though it didn't fully work out at Texas Tech. By the way, LSU crystal ball to get one of my favorite receivers in the portal, Barian Brown, spent 3 years at Kentucky. If you follow recruiting, he was maybe the highest rated recruit one of the highest rated recruits to ever commit to Kentucky. His first year, 50 catches as a true freshman in 2022, 43 in 2023. And then this year, as the offense kind of fell apart around him, he had his worst numbers, obviously decides to get out. And I bring it up because he has been crystal ball to LSU. So we will see if LSU can close on him and can close on Nick Anderson. I'll tell you what, you get Nick Anderson and Barian Brown, you instantaneously have one of the best wide receiver rooms in college football. I'll say this too about LSU really quick. I thought, I kind of mentioned the lack of dynamic playmakers at Alabama this year. I thought it was the same with LSU. You took out Kyron Lacey, you took out Mason Taylor. There just wasn't much there. These are the kind of guys LSU needs. Obviously much the same at Texas A&M. I think that's it for this update here. 18-minute update. Not bad. Getting your bang for your buck here. Do me a quick favor. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, make sure to do so. And also, as I said, make sure that you are following our CFB Transfers page, CFB Transfers on Twitter and Instagram. Be back on Sunday night, by the way.